and folks, welcome to the Kaiju Lounge, your home for humor, opinions, and nerd shit. And my guest tonight is a storyboard artist, a comic creator, and an animator who's been making the circuit, bringing his sweet little blue witch Bluehilda to the page, the screen, and with any luck, to your hearts. Take a look.
I'm going to the woods to bag myself the most ferocious creature for dinner. The copperback raboon. He's gonna look good in my oven.
Oh, but my lady, you've never been out in the woods before. There might be witch hunters.
I know, but I can't be cooped up in here all the time. For 10 flippin' years of my life, I've been getting a bum rap just because my family tree has a few bad apples on it. I'm a good witch, and I've been eagerly training for the day where I can finally go out into the world and show everyone what I'm made of!
Sounds lovely, my dear. I'll go get the table set.
Thank you, Boris. Okay, Francis, we're off!
Friends and folks, welcome to the show, James Sugrue. James, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Noah. How are you?
I'm sweating in the New York heat, but otherwise I'm finding a way to survive.
Really? It's actually been getting lovely out.
It has been getting lovely. What I've done is I've boarded up to make my room as dark as possible to film in, and it's a problem of my own making at this point. So we met at Anatomo. I got to talk with you briefly. You had your booth up. I was impressed by your work. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of all this, I always like to check in with someone when I meet them at a con. How was the rest of Anatomo for you?
It was really good. A lot of people came by and approached my booth. I showed them the comic. Some people thought she was really cute. Others maybe weren't into it right away. But out of the 20 copies that I printed for the convention, I had 7 left. So, I mean, I think that's pretty
More
good
than half.
for the second time around.
That's great. That's great. Had you done Anatomo before?
Never. First time. And I believe this was their
Never.
second year. Yep. It was very
yes, correct.
It was fun.
And it was already good. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, I was very impressed with, for a free con, how not free it felt. As in, like, the production value was high. You hear free con, you don't think that scale, but really walking around, and I've been, telling this to anyone who'll listen to me, which is rarely few. But you just impressed that how they could pull that off. I was pretty impressed. Did you get a chance to leave your booth for a bit and check out the rest of the con?
I did briefly. A lot of creative people, and they had a lot of fun ideas, and looking at everyone's stuff, it just gave me a lot of good ideas of what I want to do next time.
Great. Awesome. So let's get into it. The big project for you here and what you were putting out there was Bluehilda. For anyone who kind of missed your brief explanation on my con coverage video earlier, let's take the chance to have a much longer conversation about it. What is Bluehilda?
So Bluehilda is a very Looney Toony, little off-the-wall magical girl who, as silly as she is, her heart is always in the right place, and all she wants to do is go out into the world and do what she wants to do, eat what she wants to eat, and meet who she wants to meet. And that is pretty much the core of her character. Unfortunately, in that quest, she usually runs into a lot of odd characters like burping gargoyles or obese little nasty pig twins and mutant bears, that kind of thing.
Amazing. As one often does in the woods, I'm sure, at least in New Jersey. Uh, so, how long have you been working on Bluehilda now? Because I believe you said it started off as just sort of a pilot idea that you had, correct?
That's where it became something to the public, but I actually first created her way back in 2006 while I was waiting online at the very first New York Comic Con.
Oh,
I
wow.
was um I was obsessed with this cartoon when I was a kid, Count Duckula, and I was inspired by that whole like creepy motif, but the character itself is kind of a dork, and I love that. And my family and I went to see the Broadway version of Wicked, and
Mm,
that further influenced me because of how Elphaba, her origin came to be based off the book. And I was
right.
fascinated by it, and I was doing all this research about, I wonder how witches are resurrected. And I always assumed that witches were monsters because of how they have green skin. But everything I look for is like, oh, they're human, they're human. And while Bluehilda did start off as a witch, when I started my comic 4 years ago, I actually identify her as a creature called a Veruga, which is it's a gay like the term Veruga, which is a Gaelic term for a wart, and that my wife actually gave me that idea, so that just stuck with it. And as far as the pilot goes, it was actually 10 years ago when I was on a hiatus and I was walking along Exchange Place in Jersey City, and I was thinking about like, man, I really want to do something with Blue Hilda. I've been just revamping the idea for since like 2006 over and over again, and then my brain said, "You've made like two or three shorts on your own time. Why don't you just make a short then?" Oh, okay. And then I just started boarding it late in late 2014, and in 2015 I wanted to show my boss Chris Pronowski like what he thought of it, and he said, "Yeah, this is cool. Let's help you put it together." And I was okay, great. And
Wow.
during certain employees' off time, they helped me put it together, like backgrounds, and I they gave me some animators, and I had a wonderful guy who did the main antagonist do perform his voice. Um, I have to Grant Moniger is his name. Very,
Okay.
very, very nice fellow. And we were doing this short for about, I would say, a year and a half, because again, this was during my regular hours doing China, Illinois,
Right.
Hot
You're not given 8
Wheels.
hours a day. You're doing like 2 if you're lucky.
Yeah, 2 or 4, give or take.
Okay.
And then the short was done in February of 2017. We screened it at our 5 second day, which is it's it's a festival that we have at Titmouse, which is like it started to be like 5 second shorts, but it turned into a minute long shorts or 2 minute long shorts. It's like I mean, but I guess the name 5 second day just stuck for the past
Right,
20 years,
right.
and it got
So
very
that's
well
interesting.
received.
That's great.
Thank you. You were
I
going to
didn't mean to
say?
interrupt. Go ahead and continue. I didn't mean to interrupt. You can continue. I'll have a question afterwards.
Oh, no worries. But so it did good. People were receptive to it. It won a few awards, like the Animation Block Party Award for Best Animation, and a SIFA first place for Best Animation. And
Oh.
my boss, Chris Panowski, tried to help me pitch it in LA, and we went to Amazon and Nickelodeon, and they thought it was a great idea. It's just they weren't quite ready for it. And to be honest, I was totally fine with that, because when I look at the short, I'm very proud of what was done, but and this is not on anybody that was involved. This is on me. There was a lot of things that I wish I did differently. Because if you look at the short,
Okay.
like Blue Hilda, she's very like you know the animation's like crazy, and I like crazy animation, but I also like a little balance of subtlety. And I
Right.
want people to really like her, not want to. Oh my! this person's so annoying, I want to punch her in the face. So when I started the comic book, I kind of did like a soft reboot based off that short, but I wanted to make Bluehilda a bit more empathetic. Like when
Mhm.
she's going into the uh, forest, is what the name of the forest is. She's there's a point where she's upset because she doesn't know where she is. She can't find her dog Francis,
Mhm.
and I thought that adds a little bit more to her character because she's a 10-year-old kid, and she doesn't know everything, so she's just learning about the world.
Right.
And the other thing I wanted to do with the comic was my antagonist, the Unbearables. They were actually human beings in like bare clothes, and I wanted to do something a little bit more quirky. Like I made them more like half human, half bear hybrids, and I wanted to kind of slick up their designs a bit more. And I've been just chugging at the comic for the past 4 years, and it's on and off once in a while because of how much work I have to do at Titmouse, but I'm still sticking with it. And there are times when I say like, "Oh, I don't know if I should keep doing this. I can't get enough eyes." My wife and my family are always like, "No, people like this. Keep doing it." And I'm still doing it, and I'm sure down the line someone is going to see this and it will become something more. I still have to make that effort, but I know that it will become something more if I find the right person to help me with that.
I get it. Look, as a creative, relatively in a different field, but still, yeah, it's I've often found that if you're not willing to do it for free, is anyone really going to pay you? And you obviously don't want to sell yourself short, but like you got to put it out there and you got to give it a chance. And it's hard, and I commend you because that kind of sticking with it, even when those times where you're kind of feeling you're sitting on the couch being like I got two people saw it today, like it's worth it. It's worth it to have it out there. And I'll say, as an outsider kind of looking in, like it's professional quality. I mean, you are a professional, it's not surprising, but like you hear somebody doing something in their off time, kind of like we're talking about the free anime convention. It's like that's you usually, you kind of have to like not say that always because it gives people an impression of well, it's amateur. This is not amateur work. What you've put out there is looking really great. That's what caught my eye when I first started talking to you. Let's talk about being a professional. You have been working at Titmouse for how long?
I've been there for 14 years, just
14
about
years.
14 years.
And you've got, an impressive resume of shows kind of under your belt here. I mean, even going through like your IMDb and stuff, seeing things like Superjail, Chicago, Illinois that you've mentioned earlier. Uh, did when you work on something like that, does it influence your personal work? Do you see that some of the projects, and especially if you're jumping between various projects, do you start having a little bit of that making their way into Blue Hilda, or do you find that little bits of Blue Hilda you're able to slyly work into the day job stuff?
Oh, definitely the shows that I work on in terms of especially with how we put together the shows, even if it's not Blue Hilda, if I'm animating something for myself, and every step of the way, everything that I've been doing on these different shows has been like, wow, that's really cool. I want to do it like that. Because when I was in college, all I wanted to do was draw everything frame by frame. And I still love frame by frame animation, but in this environment now of like, we got to get it done fast. Everything has to be done really fast right now. We have
Right.
to blah, 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 blah. So,
It's not feasible.
um, yeah. So, Titmouse over the years has shown like, look, we can use these different assets of characters, like of ear, a piece of their head, without having to draw that over and over again. But you can maybe draw brand new eyes or a new mouth depending on what's happening in the moment, and that really stuck to me. And
Mhm.
every time now when I do my work, I've been trying to just rig my characters so I don't have to draw everything over and over again. Because like, what's like, why? would you need to draw the same hands over and over again or the same torso? Like,
Yeah.
work work smart, not hard. I mean, as much as I love like traditional animation like Aladdin, Little Mermaid, 101 Dalmatians, or like any of the cartoons I grew up, it's just I want to move forward.
Right.
And what's impressive now is there's so many different ways to kind of trick the audience into thinking that like, did you draw this frame by frame? No, no, this is all this, like these are all like different pieces of a character, and like you can use like some kind of like a filter on the lines to make it look like the character's lines are moving as if you were drawing it frame by frame. So like when I was before I went to college, like we didn't have any of that kind of technology,
Yeah.
and I am so grateful in this day and age of all the amazing things we can do now.
That's unbelievable. Do you think, in your professional opinion, do you feel does frame by frame still have a home or a use in the animation industry, or do you think it's like magazines at this point? It's kind of finding its way out as other technologies are coming in.
You know what? I don't think it's going anywhere because
Okay.
there are still a lot of veteran animators who still adhere to using frame by frame, but they'll do it on either on their own personal time or they'll do a test for CG movies. Like they'll do like an animation of a character, how they're supposed to move. And then the CG artist will go off of that and be like, okay, we'll try to make it move like that. Because I worked on Leo, the Netflix movie. Like I helped out with
Yeah.
the end credits along with a lot of other amazing people. And I took when I was going through the designs, I noticed that James Baxter did a lot of the early pencil test of how Leo and Squirtle were moving. I mean, I didn't get to see the animation, but they had like little screenshots for us to reference. But there is still a place for hand frame by frame animation depending on the circumstance. Like it might be for technical purposes of like showing how a character's supposed to move, that it doesn't need color. It's just like this is a pencil test. We don't need any colors or anything. It's just to show how the characters are going to move.
Got it. Got it. Do you I mean, do you miss working in that medium at all, or do you feel like it's, now that you've kind of worked closer more in the work smarter, not harder mentality and be able to use more digital products, are you kind of, like, relieved that it's moving in that direction?
I'm relieved, but I still do frame by frame
Okay.
depending on what I'm going for. Like if I'm doing something that's only like a second or two long on my iPad, I'll do that frame by frame. But if I'm investing time in something that's going to be like 5 seconds long or even like 10 seconds long, I have to I have to rig it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just make your life easy.
Definitely.
So let's go to the early stages. You mentioned Count Duckula, which like way to pull that out of your ass. Like that what a I haven't thought about that cartoon in ages. A fantastic pull. What are some of the other ones that have kind of inspired you to stick out to you? I'm gonna make a guess, at least based off of kind of the. I know you said you've moved into more an acuter inspiration now with Bluehilda, but, I rewatched it after seeing it at your booth, the clip, and, I get a little bit of Ren and Stimpy in there. Is that fair to say?
I I like Ren and Stimpy. Like I was a huge fan growing up. I'm trying to kind of get away from that a little bit. Like I still
Understandably.
love everything that Bob Camp does because he was one of the co creators on the show. Like
Mhm.
I like everything that he does, but as far as like influences nowadays, I love watching film noir live action movies like The Professional,
Yeah.
and my wife and I love Umbrella Academy. And as far as animated influences, I love the old Looney Tunes cartoons and Popeye, and I love Sailor Moon and Lupin the Third. And one of my favorite Cartoon Network shows of all time has been Ed, Ed, and Eddie.
Oh my god, yes.
That is an amazing show.
Amazing. I've always thought the way they wrote, third Ed, tall Ed. I'm blanking on which one was Ed, Ed, and Eddie. The way they always wrote him as some of his most randomest lines, I thought were comedic genius. That show was fantastic.
Yeah, that's very, 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 very. And that show actually took me by surprise because when I first saw an image of it in TV Guide back in like 1998, I was like, oh, it's by that guy who did uh, Brothers Grunt,
Doctor
which was an
Katz.
MTV show,
Oh,
and it was like very, very, it was very odd, very, very weird. And I was like, ooh, this one's gonna be weird. And then when I got into it, the show instantly had such a charm to it, and it was so different from Brothers Grunt because it was a kids show. So, and that was the funny thing because the creator Danny Antonucci, he was known for doing adult things like the short Lupo the Butcher and
yeah.
Brothers Grunt. Someone said, "I bet you can't pitch a kids show." He faxed it to the Cartoon Network. They liked it, and the show ran for 10 years and still has a very lasting impression.
That's wow. I didn't realize it lasted for 10 years. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Most
and probably
cartoons,
one of the
I was saying most cartoons
Oh, I'm sorry.
don't get
No,
that
I was
long.
just going to say it was like probably one of the few cartoons that had a final episode that gave me a sense of closure.
Yeah, yeah, actually. That's wild. Uh, so on top of being an animator, working on other projects and your own, you're also a voice actor. You've given little examples of that. Uh, how, has that was that did that come out of necessity of sometimes just needed to do your own projects, or like what sort of came first, or did both happen simultaneously, being both an animator and a
Oh,
voice actor?
I mean, I love doing voices since I was a kid, like since watching The Simpsons and again, Aladdin. As far as like doing it professionally, that is a whole other hurdle I'm still trying to reach because, you have to be part of SAG-AFTRA
Right.
or I'm still trying to research how I can audition for things. But the people at SAG-AFTRA were very nice. They just said like, to sign up, just start off with looking for places that are associated with SAG-AFTRA. Like you don't have to be part of it, but audition, and then you let us know like you were part of this, and then you go from there. I'm assuming that's how it goes, but yes, I really want to do voices.
Let's talk about that industry a little bit because what are I always, again, as an outsider looking in, I don't know why, but I've always get really interested in seeing what trends are coming up, and oftentimes you need to be on the inside to really notice that. Uh, for you, what are you seeing as like the new change or wave in the animation industry? What are oftentimes one person does something big and then everyone else and a lot of the other studios try to follow. We need one of those. We got to have one of these. Like, is there something like that you're seeing inside of Titmouse, and also so just as an independent animator, like where is the industry shifting?
Well, um, there's really I can't really say about with Titmouse, but one of the biggest concerns that we have in the animation community is AI.
Mm,
Like right now, it's like the it factor with not even just animation, like in writing and in news, and which I think this is a good thing in surgery or with medical
mm,
field. I mean, I think that one at least is okay, but everyone's afraid that big studios are more focused on, hey, we can just like type stuff and we don't have to pay anybody. But
right.
I think this is what I'm going to say. Um, Unfortunately, AI is here to stay, but I think it's going to get to a point where big companies are going to be like, "What? How we're supposed to use this thing? I don't know what to do." And it's going to get to a point where they're going to have to ask artists like, "Hi, we
Yeah.
don't know what the hell we're doing. Could you please help us figure this out? That'd be great." So I hope it gets to a point where artists are able to use AI either to just, fix very last minute things or maybe iron out some details. It's like, oh crap, I forgot that we had to add texture to this. Like, we have to hand this in by next week to the studio. Okay, we'll have AI do that. Like, you still
Right.
pay everyone the groundwork of, like, I'm gonna put the textures on this character. I'm gonna color the sky for this background. And, they still do that, and then it's like, oh, we have to do more of these skies. It's like, oh, we'll have AI do that. Like, you do all the main key backgrounds, and we'll have AI do like the, you know, mundane stuff.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair because I think in general AI is a tool, right? It's a hammer, it's not a carpenter. The pure nature of AI of itself is to aggregate information and spit something out. So as a creative, and I'm anyone who's probably ever used Chat GPT probably know this is like it's going to give you the lowest common denominator, right? If you need humor, you need funny, it's going to look at a bunch of jokes and spit out the ones it thinks applicable. What it's not going to do is give you something original, or at least original and good. It's the same reason why a lot of AI art, all has the same kind of look. Everyone posts up videos of like uh, I don't know if you've ever seen these on like TikTok and stuff when people will do uh live action movie stills of a fake uh, li- um Thundercats movie from the 70s, and like it's a bunch of like very realistic looking photos of Lionel and the Thundercats people, but all has that same kind of like AI gloss, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I've seen that before with someone posted like a YouTube compilation of like, what if the Mario Brothers movie, like the one from like 1993,
Yeah.
was like done in the 80s, and it was horrifying. It was even more scary than the first one.
Which is saying a lot.
God.
But like at the same time, like I'll use AI in here and there when I'm like, I don't want to write another YouTube description. Here's a transcript. Just summarize this for me and save me a little bit of time. It's different. I'm still editing my own video. I'm still, here talking as a human being to you and having this conversation. I think that I don't think there's a world in which some people think AI is bad and some people think AI is great. I think AI just is.
That's I mean, that sounds like a tagline. AI. It
It
is.
is. It is. Complete with a Nike swoosh and everything.
Hmm.
Let's I want to go back to some of the stuff about influences and how it affects your work. As an animator, you're coming into different projects. You're talking about Leo, I've mentioned some other projects you work on. All these have very sort of different styles from each other. And I would argue different from, every artist, yourself included, has their own sort of signature style, something that you can often look at their original work and be like, yeah, that's James right there. How do you, and maybe the answer is like, do you truly? And this is as an outsider looking with anime, how do animators adapt to someone else's signature style for a show? I'll use Chicago, Illinois as an example. That has a very signature, unique style to it.
I would say anytime I've been on these different shows, you're pretty much like hitting the ground running. Like, you're like, we have like a talk about like, hi everyone, welcome aboard, and like, this is what the show is about, and then we just get started. And pretty much, if you're lucky enough to be on a show that already had a season one or two already, like, it's like you've seen what's been established, so you just have to make sure that you apply that into what they're looking for. Because a lot of people know me for being very exaggerated, very cartoony. And with China, Illinois, I couldn't exaggerate a lot of faces or elongate a lot of arms or anything like that, but I was able to still put in a lot of, little overshoots for characters, or a lot of big acting moments. And that was another one of those shows that influenced me to rig my characters, like separate the hand, separate the forearm, upper arm, head,
Right.
and um playing around with the easing of all the limbs. So when I even though it was so different from what I normally work on, it influenced me in a way that is applied to my work now. And even though I haven't really done too much uh projects on Harmony, I've been using Harmony on my own time, and it is a fantastic piece of software. Expensive as hell, but it's amazing the way everything they everything they set up, from like rigging to comping, and I'm still slowly trying to teach myself that program right now because it's like that is a whole other language onto itself, but it was built for animation.
That's wow. Yeah. Do you do you find there are times that you're in the middle of animating something for an external project and have to like peel back those sensibilities? You get somewhere and you realize this is too much and I need to scale down.
Oh yes, I story of my life.
Fair enough.
And one of the things that I will say to anyone listening is, sometimes there's going to be moments where you're on a project and you might not gel exactly with the show or the creators, but that doesn't mean you're bad, and that doesn't mean that the creators are wrong. I mean, it's just that, sometimes you're not always going to mix with a certain creator's sensibilities or a show style. And I've been through that, you know, God, if I how many times I've been through that, I would be a wealthy man. But I mean, as much as I still try to adhere. But um, and there's been times where I question, like, am I good? Like, if I don't get this, am I not good? And and my wife tells me, like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, you are good, and don't forget, like, you have something that people love. Stick with it. But I'm not gonna quit my job and bank on, like, hey, maybe I'll get famous this way. It's like, no, I still need to work because I have a wife and a baby on the way, so I want to be sure that I'm still supporting my loved ones.
Of course, and
The millions will
congratulations
come
with
at
the baby.
some point.
Yeah, right. Honestly, let the kid be there when they come. More people to celebrate with. So let's take the move. Some of the fans that are there right now, and they seem to be coming out for Bluehilda now in sort of this comic book form. Um, what was the decision to move to a more print-based medium like this? And uh, has comic books always been something kind of, or comics have been something in on your periphery, or is this just like, this just you thought, let's give this a try and jumped in for the first time with this?
Well, I mean, I did like comics growing up. I
Hmm.
mean, I wasn't always into a lot of superhero comics. Like, most of them, my comics were just things that were pre-existing properties, like Sonic the Hedgehog, Ren and Stimpy,
Right,
or
right.
like any Darkwing Duck comics in Disney Adventures magazine. Like, those were my comics. But as I got older, I did get into Spider-Man a bit more. And what influenced my decision to make Blue Hilda as a comic book was, as I mentioned, I love Lupin the Third, but
Hmm.
when I started watching that series, I've only known it as an anime, and I didn't know anything about the original comic book by Kazuhito Kaito, who is the author, and his pen name is Monkey Punch. When he passed away back in 2019, I was like, I don't like I love this series, but I don't know a thing about the original comics. And people were saying, like, oh yeah, the comic is so different from the anime. Like, Lupin is an animal in the manga. And I found some, and I was amazed by, like, how different it was from the anime, because in the anime he's like a gentleman, he's very happy-go-lucky, he's very sweet, while in the trigger warning, in the comic he's a bit of a scoundrel. Like, he'll
Mm.
bed women, just but and he's a little nasty. But ironically enough, I felt like over time I feel like Monkey Punch was slightly influenced by the anime version, because as I kept reading the series, he sort of made Lupin a little bit nicer. Like, in
Ah.
volumes would be like, I heard you're a thief, you only steal from bad people and help good people. Right, now go away. Like, it's like, oh, okay. But because of I was fascinated by the differences, not even with Lupin, but with like books like The Exorcist compared to the movie, and Psycho, and the Sailor Moon comic book, and the Ninja Turtles comic book, which is
Mm.
another huge influence. Is Ninja Turtles, like, 5 years old, loved that
Oh,
series
yeah.
since it started
Who
becoming big,
who
and I
who from our
loved how
generation not, right? Like
I every time I look at my figures, like, I'm so glad I did not sell you. It's funny, like, back in '97, it's like, God, remember the Ninja Turtles? Now, fast forward to like 2017 or 19. God, do you remember the Ninja Turtles?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
It's like one
yeah.
of those things that's always gonna be. It's always gonna be cool, because it's and again, that's why I'm doing this comic. Like, I love how Ninja Turtles was. It started off as a very gritty comic book, and then when they did the cartoon, it's like, oh, they all have different colored masks, and it's very cute, and it's very child friendly, not like the comic book at all. And I know, probably to the chagrin of the creators, Peter Laird, I was still fascinated by like the differences, and the same with Sailor Moon. Like, the manga is so much different compared to the '90s anime. Like, the '90s anime is, a little bit geared towards children, whereas the comic, like, I think it was aimed at children, but it was very dark. But
Mm.
I started doing the Bluehilda comic because, as much as I wanted to see it as an animated series, I still loved it enough that I wanted to write and draw whatever scenarios were in my head. And even though, like, the progression of doing this comic has been, you know, touch and go. Like, I'm doing it, then I'm exhausted 1 minute, and then I'm fully energized another second. And
Right.
I will say, though, like, everything that I wanted to have in my pitch to be animated, I've written, and it's drawn, and it's to the public now. And it's like, this is great that I'm doing that, but I'm still holding on to the fact that maybe someone will see it, and I'm hoping either A, they'll adapt everything I've written and drawn, B, it might be a slight adaptation to what I've done, or C, it might be completely different from what I've written and drawn, but it will still say, based off the comic books by Jim Grew. And,
Right.
you know, I'm ready to see that happen. And I'm hoping that Blue Hilda and any ideas I come up with in comic form is something that could be easily played with. Like, like how with Spider-Man and Batman, like, they're when you go back to them, like, they're fantastical stories, and the early Batmans are very dark, and with
Yeah.
Spider-Man, there's some serious tones here and there, but at the same time, they'll make preschool shows out of these properties, like they have with Spider-Man and his friends on Disney Plus, and but then they also have uh Into the Spider-Verse, or that really dark series, Craven's Last Hunt, which is, I highly recommend reading that. That's a fantastic story.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look, it sounds I think I've just watched, the first couple episodes of, what, Batman the Caped Crusader on HBO, which is, by the same guy behind the original '90s cartoon, both of which are very different Batmans than, like, Batman the Brave and the Bold, which is also a great cartoon, but a very different, feel to it. So it sounds like a lot of what kind of driven you, to doing comic outside of is probably there's a medium you can work with a little bit faster, but also the chance to reinvent and the opportunity to reinvent in a new medium. Uh, was when it comes to the writing side of it, is writing for Blue Hilda uh, or just in general, writing for animation feel very different than writing for still art, in this case, comics? Or do you feel that you kind of write the same for both?
Well, I've personally never written anything for uh other people, like, but from what I've seen, like every cartoon I've worked on, they've always done scripts, and um, they'll like, yeah, that's like I look through certain files, and sometimes people will do like a big log line about like, this is what this story is going to be about. It could be like a page or two, and then they'll follow up with a script, and then they'll be like, okay, here's the first draft, here's the second draft, here's the third draft, and then here's the fourth draft. And then they'll have the actors record their lines, and then after the actors record their lines, that's when the uh, pre production animation starts, especially with the storyboarding, because we're not just drawing out the frames of what's going to happen for animation. We're also like scrubbing through the actors' audio so we can make sure like whatever the afflictions are giving in their acting, we apply that in our drawings.
Right.
But to be honest, when I do my comic, I don't do scripts. I
Oh.
just I write like a two paragraph outline of like what I'm expecting to happen in the chapter, and then I'll do thumbnails of my comic, and just like as I'm doing it, I'll just scribble in the dialogue as I go, and if I'm not satisfied, like, oh, I'll punch it up when I start typing it later.
Oh, wow.
But
Okay, so you're
I'm
you're
not
kind of going
saying that
simultaneously.
pretty much. Like I wouldn't say to people like, oh no, don't do scripts. Scripts are dumb. Like I would say it is professionally good to do a script. I mean, just for me, like since my idea is very visual, I just write and draw at the same time. Like I haven't tried script writing yet. I just write the dialogue as I go. And I believe that's what Akira Toriyama did for Dragon Ball.
Really? I mean, it's almost
Yep.
as if art is subjective. But
It
I
is.
mean,
It
yeah.
is very like what I was mentioning earlier about like how you might not gel with people's ideas or creators.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's subjective. No, you're not wrong. You're not right, or they're not wrong. They're not right. But at the same time, it's just that's how they want to do it, and this is how you want to do your thing. But as long as you are able to finish it on time, it's subjective. That's
Yeah.
about it.
No, totally. Um, we're gonna get a little deep here with Blue Hilda. You mentioned some of the things of like what could happen in the future with this character with his IP. Do you see or maybe you don't even really have an answer to this yet. Do you see the goal as being able to like sell this IP as a WB and or whatever other Paramount whatever company out there and kind of rake in on royalties on that, or are you hoping as this like this will always be in your hands in some way? Because you hear both good things. Obviously,
Well,
like Ninja Turtles is such a huge deal. We talked about that, but we also know that like that's not without its hiccups for Eastman and Laird. I know I don't think I have all the details of the story, but I know they kind of like lost control of the IP, and I believe one of them has had regrets about that. Like, where like when you think about Blue Hilda, um, are you just is it more that you're just happy to see it out there whenever happens, or do you always want to make sure that you have some hand in this?
I definitely would still like to have a hand in how it's being made or being done, but um I guess I could say that, if you want to make something and put it out to the world, there is a risk of you not having so much control over it because, people are investing their time and money to help you with this IP that you have. And, if this IP is earning you a bit of royalty, even if it's not exactly the way you pictured it, isn't that kind of like a double-edged sword? Because, um, like, I don't know. Like, I myself don't know what the future holds. Like, all I know is I want this thing to become a franchise in a way, or become some fun intellectual property that could be branched out in all different genres or just uh, different age groups. Like, that's
Right.
all I know that I want to see.
Yeah. Have it affect
But
various lives,
there's been
however it does so. Yeah, kind of like I see like a SpongeBob almost, and all even though if it's the target demographic may be one thing, but it really hits an all ages uh
not to not
approach.
to not to sell myself short, but SpongeBob I can never touch because that show is beyond brilliant. The things
It's
that Steve Hillenburg came up with for that show, due to the fact that he was a marine biologist before getting into animation, like it shows, and
wild.
it's amazing what came out of that series. Like I have so much respect for that show.
It truly. I don't think we. I know it's not a show like look. It gets a lot of love. People love SpongeBob. This is not to take away from that, but like I I agree with you that I don't know if it gets necessarily the recognition it deserves for how brilliant it is and how and its staying power and in a way that Simpsons could never, how even the first couple of episodes feel as evergreen as the latest episodes. It just feel, and I think that's timeless. Timeless is a way. Not all cartoons feel timeless. There are plenty that feel of the era they were. I think of a lot of Fox Kids and Kids WB stuff as not being timeless. But I do view what I think the magic of SpongeBob is that you could watch it at any point in your life and any point in its history since it's began, and it would still it doesn't feel old.
And that's the other thing when I was doing my Bluehilda comic that, again, not trying to get ahead of myself, but any
Oh,
ideas that I do, I want it to have a sense of staying power for whatever happens down the line. And that's why I think Ninja Turtles is so successful because, they had that 80s cartoon.
mhm.
That live action movie is probably the closest you'll get of something that is directly adapted from the original first comic book. Like that fight scene of them with the shredder. That, I
Oh
mean, that
yeah.
was like just gorgeous. And how, like, I didn't know it when I was a kid about the comic book, but when I started reading the comic book and seeing the movie again, like, this is such a takeoff from the comic book, with the exception that they all have different colored masks and they have much more defined personalities, which I also attributed to their success.
Yeah.
Like, because again, this as much as I love the comic book, I think one of the great things about the 80s cartoon was that they all had much more unique personalities from that cartoon, and it shows in the later incarnations of them as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are some adaptations that can do it right.
Uh, I I'd be curious to get your thought on this. Someone who's kind of studied a lot of this is that, you know, obviously, like, let's take off the rose tinted color glasses for a second. That Ninja Turtles cartoon was designed to sell toys, as were most
Oh yeah,
cartoons of that era and a lot of cartoons since. However,
still to this day.
still to this day, absolutely. But something about that cartoon and the Ninja Turtles was able to transcend. Even as kids, I always had a bullshit. Maybe they're just me, but I feel like I always had a bullshit sense, right? I could tell the Ninja Turtles was something, whereas Cowboys and Moo Mesa and Biker Mice from Mars were toy machines, right? Right? Like we're talking two different things.
Oh,
In your opinion, why do you think that Turtles passed the bullshit test, the toy selling bullshit test, in a way that most cartoons don't?
Well, for me, when I was 5 years old seeing this, I think the reason why it passed the bullshit test was because I, to me, I got a sense of, yes, they were trying to market something to sell toys of, but it was something that no one has ever seen before. Like, this was like after He-Man and, all the superheroes with like capes and strong muscles. Like, these were fucking reptiles. And like even though they had muscles, they weren't wearing costumes. They were like they had shells, and they and I love the designs of their toes, as they look like ninja feet, like how ninjas have like those little
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
in
the
their
socks.
slippers.
I never thought
And
about that, but you're absolutely right. They were designed the same way.
and like, even like when I was 5 years old, I just never saw anything like that. Because and even the way they promoted the toys was like, they always made it like so goofy and fun. It wasn't like, now Ninja Turtles, it's like Teenage Mutant, oh no, here comes Raph with his sewer skis. Like, it was like they did it in such like a bombastic way that was just so different from other toy commercials. I think that's what drew me into loving the series so much. And every time I look at those toys, I think the designs are so much fun to look at,
They are.
especially with how some of them are very different from the cartoon.
Yeah, I like. Well, I think it's the reason I never got into like GI Joes or even Transformers for that matter. They just weren't silly enough for me. I think it's the general thing.
And that was, and like, throughout my entire childhood, all I've ever wanted was toys of anything that had like a silly factor to it. Like, I never, like, I had a few GI Joes, I had a good amount of Transformers, but all I've ever wanted was Ninja Turtle toys, or figures of Daffy Duck, or any comic relief characters from Disney movies. And lately, I've been collecting the bad guys from Super Mario Brothers series, like
Oh
the
yeah.
Koopas.
Yeah, so that doesn't like you don't want threatening, you want fun, and I think that shows. And so far, all your inspirations you've given me throughout this interview, but also within Bluehilda itself, it's fun, and I think that's important. We're getting towards the end of our time here, but before we do, I want to play a little game with regards to the Bluehilda IP you have here. I'm going to name out just sort of a marketing or a product section, and I want you to sort of describe in your perfect world what these would feel like. I'll easy example. First one, toy. What approach would you take to a Bluehilda toy set?
You know what I would love to see? She lives in a tree house called the Shrub Hub, and it would be great to have like a place set that had, like, you open it up and it has like little figurines of her butler slash dad, Boris, and her dog Francis. And the other thing I would love to see are Funko Pops.
I think she absolutely works as a Funko Pop. That shape and everything. Great.
Yeah.
Um, Video game. What would a Bluehilda video game look like? Up there we go.
I would see it as a two things. Uh Beat 'em up, like when you're just progressing into a level, just beating random uh no-brainer enemies until you get to the big bad in each world, or a turn-based RPG game where it's
Mm,
Bluehilda, and I have been growing a cast of characters as I go, and like, this person has joined your team, and they all have unique and very quirky abilities, and some of them aren't even magic. Like, I have a character now who, she's a girl with big frizzy curly hair, and her
yeah.
uh thing is rubbing her hair really hard to build up static electricity that she conducts into her metal bracelets and just shocks people.
I love
And
that.
she does this by sticking freshly laundered socks into her hair so she can build up static.
That's great. Uh, Last one, movie. You go animated. Is it a continuation of whatever animated series you have here? Is it a live action? How would you approach a Blue Hilda movie?
I would definitely either do like a continuation if it was an animated movie, and people are gonna think I'm nuts for saying this, but if anyone approached me to do a live action, most people probably think I would say no. I would say I would only do a live action if it was handled like the Sonic movie, because the design of him in that movie was like the redesign
The
of
the
him
final the
was
final design.
so gorgeous. The
Yeah.
final design, because like it's like now he looks like an actual cartoon character, or it looks more like the aesthetic of the video games. I mean, like it with a Bluehilda live action, it would be like, it would be, there's some people would be real, but she would look semi-real, but they would still do some trickery to make her look like she has rubber hosey arms, like the
Right, right.
comic or the animation.
Getting almost closer to like a Roger Rabbit in a way.
Pretty close, or even um like I haven't seen the movie yet, like Battle Angel Alita. Like
Ah,
I've seen
yes.
the anime of that, and and the way they handled that was like that the way they designed her, that's pretty close to the anime. And it's like it's an actress, but they put all these like toony ish effects on her. And
Yeah,
I thought that was kind of cool. I haven't seen it yet,
totally.
but I'm dying to check it out.
I've only watched like clips on YouTube, but having compared that to like the pictures, I wasn't as familiar with the whole series in general, but like just seeing things side by side, like yeah, they took a pretty good approach to being true to the source material, something that a lot more adaptations could still afford to do. Borderlands, I'm looking at you like I think this is still a plague we're still for some reason seeing in Hollywood that's making no sense to me.
Like it's weird. Like lately, anytime I've seen adaptations that I'm aware of, I feel like they have been more conscious about the source material, either if they're paying a homage to a cover page, or it's like, oh, they actually took bits and pieces from this story arc and they're putting it into this episode or movie. That's pretty impressive. Like,
Yeah.
it's not quite there yet, but it's it's better than it was then in the 80s and 90s, because like I mentioned before with Super Mario, like that, oh my god, that movie was
Oh,
that 90s movie was like, oh my god, like I don't see any turtles, I don't see any mushroom people compared to what they did last year. Like, oh my god, they did exactly what I wanted to. They that I wanted since I was a kid, and it's actually pretty
yes.
good.
Yeah, I mean, I think I keep thinking how much I would love to see someone tackle a Street Fighter movie now because we still have the bad taste of the otherwise amazing Raul Julia uh in her mouth. And I feel like in this world that like where even a Mortal Kombat movie can be good, it's like it's time for a redo on a couple of different things. James, I really appreciate you hopping on. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about your work. For the people watching this, if they want to learn more, where can they find you?
Um, I have Bluehilda on Webtoon Canvas. All you have to do is just type in Bluehilda, Bluehilda, and then she's right there. And she's also on Patreon that has more exclusive perks like behind the scenes content for each chapter. And I have a YouTube channel, and it's called Sugrue Boy. It's basically my last name, but it's spelled differently. It's SAGOOBOY.
Wonderful. All right, James, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. People, if you like this, be sure to give it a like, give it a subscribe. Also, head over to James' channel, so Goo Boy, give that a subscribe as well. Follow him across the board. One more time, we thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk with me. I really appreciate it. For everyone else, we'll catch you later. Stay cool, stay hip, stay heavy. Good night.